Hey there, this is That News You Care About, a weekly video game news show from the folks over at That Nerdy Site. I am your one and only host this week, Logan Wilkinson, and today is Monday, September 28th, 2020. The rest of That Nerdy Site team, unfortunately, is away, and while they are, Logie's going to play and share some James Bond video game thoughts that he has. This is a draft of a script I wrote years ago for an eventual video essay, but I thought the thoughts remain the same, my feelings remain the same, and so I've decided to include it as a special audio recorded episode of That News You Care About for this week. I hope you enjoy. Why is it so hard to make a great James Bond video game? This is the eternal question that keeps me up at night. Why have games so utterly failed to capture the feel, magic, and spirit of one of cinema's greatest heroes? Why have there been so few good 007 games, let alone great ones? Let's pull it back for a second, though. I really like James Bond. In fact, I love him. From the first time I ever watched one of his movies when I was a 5-year-old, all the way to now, James Bond has been one of the most defining and personal series for me. I love it in ways few things approach, and as scandalous as it may sound, James Bond is almost certainly one of the 2 or 3 most important film franchises for me. So you can believe me when I say that I've played basically every single James Bond video game I could get my hands on. From GoldenEye, to GoldenEye Rogue Agent, to GoldenEye Remastered. The series is a thing for GoldenEye. But anyway, I've played them all. The good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm the crazy guy who owns every single movie and has seen them all about a dozen times each. This is a series I know frontwards and backwards. Yet sometimes it takes those who truly love something to recognize its flaws, and James Bond has its fair share. Now, there are absolutely brilliant and stunning films. See, From Russia with Love, You Only Live Twice, and Skyfall. But there's also stuff like Moonraker and The Man with the Golden Gun. And the film series is the same way. Except the problem is the games don't really have any of the highest highs the films do. None of the 007 games approach the wonder and awe of watching From Russia with Love, or the feeling of seeing Blofeld for the first time at the end of You Only Live Twice. None of the games have a moment of beauty that equals some of Skyfall scenes. Indeed, I'd argue most of the games are simply forgettable and totally adequate experiences. Nothing more or less. Let's take, for example, the game that was basically the video game of my childhood dreams. The game I always thought about and hoped for but never expected to come true. 007 Legends. The video game where you actually get to play through some of the most famous moments and movies of the Bond mythology. A game stuffed to the gills with promise and potential. A game that was built for someone like me to love. Somehow, though, this became among the most disastrous and awful games I've ever played. It's real bad, guys. Joyless, a nightmarish distortion of the moments it was supposed to be letting players experience firsthand. This is a game that seemed to be made almost by someone who'd only ever seen 5-second YouTube clips of a few Bond movies mixed with Austin Powers reruns. And then with a dash of bland action movie heroes thrown on top of it. Sterile, comically off the mark about what the movies it was covering were actually about, and with a gross misunderstanding of who this character was and what made him special. So how come the video game series has gotten the Brit suave hero so wrong? How come there hasn't been a new 007 game in more than 4 years, with none at all on the horizon to come, and with quite possibly none coming for the far, far, far foreseeable future after that? Seriously, its licensing is a nightmare. What went wrong? What happened? Well, in short, and to put it simply, the games are mostly bad. I don't mean every single one, and we'll get to the good ones. But as with most things, there are exceptions, of course. but this is a series that has suffered from a crippling number of mediocre, unoriginal, bland installments. Now, out of all the games that make up the James Bond video game legacy, I can honestly and without any reservations recommend one be played by anybody regardless of age or anything else. At the most, 3. And it's not the one you're probably thinking of. Everything or Nothing is the best James Bond video game. Debatable for me now. Now, before you go and burn down comment sections about how spectacular GoldenEye 64 is, let me explain. GoldenEye is one of the most important, consequential, and groundbreaking video games ever released, and is arguably the most important first-person shooter of its generation. The thing is, though, it's just not fun to play. It isn't. The game doesn't hold up well, and that's not a swipe at it or a shot at those who enjoyed it. It's simply me stating that games, particularly first-person shooter ones, no longer play like they did in 1996. That's a good thing. This doesn't take away at all from GoldenEye's immense legacy. It broke through and started a first-person shooter revolution that is still being felt today. Shout out to Call of Duty. But the genre has evolved and transformed itself in ways unlike maybe any other video game genre. And today, GoldenEye feels old, antiquated, and unfun. And you're more than free to disagree. Please, I would love to hear your rebuttals. But I'd also ask, have you actually played the game recently? Because I have, and it's a mess. Disorienting, clumsy, plodding, and nearly impossible to figure out what's going on when 4 people are playing at once. It doesn't have much of a story, even by mid-90s standards, or 007 ones for that matter. And that's the problem. The game the overwhelming vast majority of people who've played Bond video games want to bring back isn't very good by today's standards. The entire target and dream people have of what a James Bond video game should be is misguided. Everything or Nothing and Nightfire is perhaps the most anti-GoldenEye 64 game in the series. Everything or Nothing is one of the only games in the series to not have multiplayer deathmatch. Its focus is almost entirely on the narrative and themes it's tackling. It's intense, a joy, and features of villain, allies, and missions that rank among the best of its time. Put simply, it is far and away the most cinematic and true-to-form Bond video game. The problem, of course, is that Everything or Nothing is not the golden rule by which all other games in the series are modeled. It's not even close. Even within the past decade, in the post-Everything or Nothing era, the games have largely been hit or miss, and have very much veered away from the template Everything or Nothing laid down. The problem with the video game series of James Bond is that it's torn by people's love of its breakthrough and groundbreaking game. GoldenEye has aged poorly, and the series as a whole has suffered from a case of rose-tinted glasses, and it's doomed it to 2 decades of mostly bad decisions, forgettable titles, and eventually a crash. We as consumers and gamers have largely been our own worst enemies. Why don't more 007 games match the quality and polish of Everything or Nothing? Why don't more match its focus on a single-player narrative and a wide, sprawling story? Because people don't want it. They want deathmatch, they want capture the flag, and they want golden gun multiplayer. I'm hardly immune to this. I love playing Bond games with friends, sitting on the couch, screaming and yelling at every other shot, kill, and misstep. But that's not what's going to save this franchise. GoldenEye seemingly invented a genre it subsequently couldn't keep up with, and now the likes of Call of Duty, Battlefield, and more have mastered and far, far surpassed where 007's at. And then you have games like Overwatch, Destiny, and The Division that have gone in different and unique directions to reformat what a multiplayer shooter can be. There's no room and no time for a Bond game to work its way back into the good graces of first-person shooters like they used to be. The world of GoldenEye simply no longer exists, ironically, largely because of that game's impact. So what's next? Where does this leave us in the world's most iconic spy when it comes to games? Well, Maybe James Bond just isn't meant to make it in the gaming sphere. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's no shame there. Not every great movie makes a great game, or even needs to be. Film and games are two vastly different worlds, and while there are certainly a number of similarities when it comes to telling compelling, moving, and powerful stories, there are also a large number of differences. To say nothing of the simple fact that you observe films and play games. I'm an optimist, though. Ultimately, I believe that a great James Bond video game story can be told. I believe that we can find the right playstyle, feel, and mechanics for such a game, and that someone out there, some studio, is capable of turning this whole sorry mess around. Everything or Nothing is a great James Bond single-player experience. And if we could couple that with the amazing multiplayer experience of a game like Nightfire or Agent Underfire on the PS2, we could truly get a great James Bond all-around experience. But who knows? Maybe I'm just an optimist. A hopeful video game fanatic of a series that long ago should have ended. After all, I thought Die Another Day was a good Bond movie. What do I know? And I'm back. If you liked that audio recording, episode special of That News You Care About, let us know, and we'll maybe look at doing more things like that. In the meanwhile, you can find That News You Care About on podcast services all across the globe. If you could like, subscribe, and share with your friends, and tell all your grannies and neighbors, that would be amazing, and it really does help for shows like this. You can also go support That Nerdy Site over at patreon.com/thatnerdysite, like all of our wonderful patrons have. Their support keeps the lights on and makes shows like this happen, and we are eternally grateful for their support. Otherwise, you can go find me at Lefty Logie or Logie. I gave up about it on the internet, all across there. Please let me know what you think about James Bond video games, their future, their potential, what the best and worst games in the series are. I would love it. Nothing makes me happier than talking about James Bond on the internet. Otherwise, you can go find That Nerdy Site at That Nerdy Site all across the internet as well. Like I said, you can go find the Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. Without that, play your games and be good to each other.